Well, happening earlier this week, Senators Deb Fischer and Pete Ricketts made a stop in Lincoln to talk about the possible renewal of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, set to expire at the end of this year. Also known as the TCJA, this legislation has provided some tax relief for ag producers since it was first passed back in 2017, and now its future could have a big impact on farm and ranch operations across Nebraska. On Tuesday, Senators Ricketts and Fischer stood alongside Mark McCard from the Nebraska Farm Bureau to call on Congress to renew the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Senator Ricketts said that since this law was passed, wages have gone up and more than 6 million Americans have been lifted out of poverty.
80% of our farms and ranches are family owned. And so when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, that had a tremendous impact on our farm and ranch families. We talked about some of those things already. Bringing down the tax rates for middle income earners, doubling the child tax credit, and importantly, doubling the exemption for the death tax. That meant that half as many of our Nebraska farm and ranch families were going to be impacted by that death tax, thus making it easier to pass along that family farm or ranch to the next generation. And as Mark McCarg was just saying, we have many, many ranches and farms in the state that are in their third, fourth, and going to.
Now, when Senator Fischer took the podium, she stressed that failing to renew these tax cuts could result in a $4 trillion tax increase on American families, including farm and ranch families, starting in 2026.
As you know, in 2017, the Congress passed the tax reform. That was the first comprehensive pro-growth tax reform in over 3 decades. It delivered meaningful tax relief to families in Nebraska and all across our nation. We are still working through what's called budget reconciliation process, and that is key to extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So we're working on that in the Senate and the Houses as well. It is a work in progress. Nothing is finalized yet, but I'm going to continue to advocate for policies that deliver for Nebraska's families, for our farmers, for our ranchers, for our businesses. Congress has to come together and make these tax cuts permanent. Because of this legislation, most Americans saw bigger paychecks. Businesses were able to deliver for the American people by investing in their business, expanding their businesses, and the U.S. regained its competitive edge in the global economy. But that progress is at risk. If Congress does not act to extend this law, it's going to expire at the end of the year, putting families, putting ag producers, and putting small businesses in jeopardy. For example, if these tax cuts expire, Americans would see a $4 trillion tax increase in 2026. The average family of 4, that makes $80,000 a year, would see a $1,700 tax increase. And we would see the child tax credit decrease by $1,000 per child, and that would hit our working families very hard. So Senator Ricketts and I are working with our colleagues in the United States Senate through this process that we're now in to make sure that we can deliver for the American people.
After the press conference, had the chance to go one-on-one with Senator Ricketts and get his thoughts on some of the recent announcements coming out of USDA to cut more jobs, some reportedly 8,000 of them in the month of May, and shift some of the USDA operations out of the nation's capital and set up more of a regional-based hub approach for USDA across the country.
I would love to see the USDA move out of Washington, D.C. and get closer to its customers, which are generally going to be in the middle part of this country. So anything that the Secretary can do with regard to helping assist that, I think it would be great.
We'll keep a close eye on this piece of legislation, let you know any major news that develops on that front right here on the show.